We will call this meeting to order. Notice that Robert may be attending virtually and that Vicki probably will not be able to attend this evening. Proof of public notice per Wisconsin statutes. Notice of this workshop was posted on Tuesday, June 28th, 2022 per Town Burkhalter District Administrator. I would like a motion indicating the resolve of notice being legally posted.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Mission statement. The Viroqua Area School District provides a quality education for all students that inspires continuous learning, positive relationships, curiosity, and compassion in an environment that welcomes diversity while developing respectful and responsible citizens. The fourth item on the agenda is facility planning survey results and school perceptions. And we just want to make everyone aware that this meeting is being recorded live on YouTube. So thank you all for attending, and we can begin.
Outstanding. I think that's my cue. So what I want to do with you this evening is talk a little bit about who I am, a little bit about school perceptions very briefly, and then get to the meat of it, which is your results and some possible steps moving forward. So I don't believe that we had the opportunity to meet yet. And by the way, I do appreciate your flexibility in meeting virtually tonight. We're in Chippewa Falls and in Viroqua tonight, and you're close, but not that close. 2 hours and 4 minutes, I think, to be exact. And so we can speed, but not that fast. So I do appreciate your flexibility in allowing us to present virtually. Again, my name is Rob. I serve as the research director at School Perceptions. We've been in business now for 20 years. In those 20 years, our mission has never, ever changed. And it's primarily to do three things, which is gather, organize, or help you gather, organize, and use data to make strategic decisions. In those 20 years, we've conducted well over, at this point, 10,000 staff, parent, student, and community surveys, all in the name of school improvement. And those 10,000 surveys have been spread across more than 850 districts, doing exactly what you have been doing, what you're doing tonight, what you will be doing in the future, which is navigating your planning and pre-referendum planning processes. So primarily tonight, I want to go over some of the background info. So a little bit of review of what was in your survey, some reminders in the survey administration logistics, obviously your results and analysis will cover, and then I'll leave some time at the end for some wrap up and questions for you. So just a reminder of the process. So we kickstart our surveys by households in the district receiving a paper copy of the survey. At that point, respondents really had one of two options. They could fill out the paper survey and return that directly to us. We didn't want you part of that process on purpose. A, that's what you hire us to do. But B, at the same time, in the name of confidentiality, we don't want you part of that so that people's responses stay confidential to them. We simply provide the data. So people return those directly to us, or the other confidential route to take the survey is using the survey code that's printed on the front of the survey. And that is a one-time use code, heavy emphasis on one-time use. So once somebody finishes their survey, it's done and gone. They cannot take it over and over again and potentially skew your results, which would be very hard to do in a small rural area like Viroqua, but they can't. So that doesn't mean that other people couldn't take the survey. If there were more than one adult in the household, they could certainly call the district. We provided some extra codes, or if somebody loses the survey on the counter, by all means, they could have given you a call and let you know. But otherwise, the takeaway here is it's a one-time use. As we move on, as you know, your survey was conducted in May and June, and we did tack one extra week on. There were some people that didn't get their survey quite as fast as other people. And the purpose of that additional window was simply to allow those people fair access to take the survey. And that was the only reason. You know, it's not necessarily to get a result that anybody is looking for. That's not what we're in the business of doing. We're in the business of telling you like it is. We don't sugarcoat anything because that doesn't do anybody any good. If we believe a referendum is going to pass, we'll tell you that. If we believe a referendum is going to fail, we're going to tell you that because you can only plan from accurate data. So that is the reason why the survey was left open an extra week, was solely to allow those people some extra time to take the survey who didn't get it all at the same time. That left a total of 810 total respondents for a response rate just a hair below 20%. And that's pretty darn good. In the research world, that's a number that'll make researchers salivate. And so we feel very confident in these results. with a 19.3% response rate. We feel confident even when we get down into low teens. And as soon as you start approaching 20, you're in really good shape. The other thing here is once we cross 400, 500, 600 respondents, the data really quiets down. It's very noisy in the first couple of days as different respondents give you their feedback. And so the results can kind of jump around a little bit, but after the first few hundred, it's really going to quiet down. So the benefit of that is that your margin of error will shrink as well. And so you're looking at a margin of error of just a hair over 3.5%. So who took your survey? One thing that I like to do here is pause and compare who took your survey by age group as compared to who lives within your district. And we can do that because the Census Bureau does do annual disaggregations, not just by municipality, but by school district boundaries as well. So what I'm looking for here is a bell curve that breaks up top, and that is what I see. And the reason I say that is because 1% of your survey takers were in the 18 to 24-year-old bucket, and that's always what it is, always. It's the age group that's least likely to show up and vote, and it's the age group that's least likely to take surveys. For reference, though, a little over 5.5% of your community falls into that bucket. Your 25 to 34-year-olds, moving up our bell curve here, was almost spot on. 10.5% of your community is there, 11% of your survey takers. And then we get to the top of the bell curve from 35 to 54, we're a little overrepresented, and that's exactly what I would expect and want to see. And the reason I say that is because these ages in the middle here are prime parenting age and it's prime working age. So some of your staff will be captured there, but especially your parents will be captured there as well. And I always tell admin leaders, I tell boards that if staff and parents aren't even taking a school-related survey, then nobody will take a school-related survey. So I want to see overrepresentation here, and that is what I see. So that's good. Your 55 to 64 was also pretty close. A little over 15% of your community is 55 to 64, whereas 17% of your survey takers are there. And your 65 plus is overrepresented to the tune of about 6%. And that's also good news. And the reason I say that is because unlike 18 to 24-year-olds, your 65 plus crowd, they will be there. They have perfect election attendance. They will let you know what they think on election day. So we have to know what they're thinking in a survey. And they're the most likely to be retired and on a fixed income. And so, especially in a school survey where many people in that age, they've had their kids done and gone. They have come and gone, and they're very likely kind of out of that stage of their life. But I still want to make sure that we're hearing their thoughts on a survey. And so that's where our bell curve breaks a little bit up top, and that's good. I want to hear from them. We then asked, is your primary residence in the Viroqua area schools? And this was about a 92-7 breakdown. 1% isn't sure where they live, but a 92-7 breakdown. Your 7%, there are three legs to that stool. First, your staff. There's no requirement for them to live within the district boundaries, but they have an email address, so they're going to get the survey. Your parents who open enroll into the district, by definition, don't live there, or they wouldn't need to open enroll in, so they're going to have an email address. They'll be there. And then if I were to have a second home or a second property in the district and I have a mailbox, I'm going to get it. But even though some of those 7% might be influential, you might have a long tenured social studies teacher that's been there for 40 years, they're going to get the survey, but they can't vote there. And so that influence is still capped. So what we're going to do on many of these analyses moving forward is take out the 8% and only focus on the 92%, because those are the folks that get to control an election within your district's boundaries. Two pie graphs that we put right next to each other on purpose. We ask, are you an employee of the district, and do you have children currently attending a school in the district? What my eyes do here is I want to ensure that staff and parents are taking the survey, but I want to make sure that they're not the only people taking a survey, because most people in the community are not going to be employed by you and are not going to have a kid currently enrolled in school. And that's what I'm seeing. So 86% of respondents don't work at school, and over half do not currently have a kiddo enrolled in one of your schools. Now we're back to our blue backgrounds here. So blue is the background information. So anytime you see blue, nothing on those slides is new. There's no new data, no new analysis, no new results. All of it is just a simple repeat of what was in your survey, so that you only have to go to one place to remind yourself what was in the survey. So just as a reminder for you, you talked a little bit about how you're performing financially and the downward trend of your mill rate, but that has not come at the expense of student achievement. You continue to exceed expectations. You had your recognition from US News and World Report, and you're really proud of this combination of your financial health and academic performance. Again, word for word, what was in your survey? We talked about how maintenance staff are doing all they can to keep your buildings in good working order, but some of the projects that you're looking to get feedback on from the community are simply too large to be covered in your annual maintenance budget. And these are what you see on your screen now. So some of the things you talked about in your survey was everything from security and tech ed to age-appropriate bathrooms, stormwater, gym space, and so on. Then your results and analysis. So what did we ask first? The first question was, would you support the district exploring a referendum to pay for the projects identified above? This is kind of the first hurdle to get over. Because at this point, I can tell you to explore till the cows come home and it doesn't cost me a nickel as a survey respondent. So if people are saying no to this, then it's time to back up a little bit and reevaluate our plans here. It's also a good way to say, if you hear no later on in the survey, is there an appetite at all to do something within the Viroqua area schools? And the answer is yes. So over 3 and 4 of your staff members in gray are saying yes. Exactly 3/4 of your parents are saying yes. And 58% of your non-parents, non-staff are saying yes to this. Now, a couple of notes about this. Even though the slide bars look pretty similar, bear in mind that there's not the same number of people that feed each bar. Or putting that differently, staff are very influential. They are the ones that are going to get stopped in the grocery store and say, hey, something's going on at school. I got this survey. Tell me about what's going on. So very influential, but proportionally, there's just not that many of them. In any given community, about 1% or so of people are employees of the district. Your parents are kind of in the middle. About a quarter of your community will be a parent of a school-aged kiddo. Your non-parents, non-staff are about 75% of your community. So whenever you see the label non-parents, non-staff, or whenever you see a purple bar, put your eyes there first, because that's where most people are going to be fed into. So here I'm seeing that a majority of all of the subgroups are leaning toward the yes, go ahead and explore something to address some of the projects that were on the previous page. Your no is pretty close to what we always see. There's always about a quarter or so of non-parents, non-staff that are going to say no, even to exploration. In fact, you're a little bit below that, so maybe you're slightly below normal there, but there's absolutely nothing uncommon on this slide otherwise. And same for not sure, needing more information. Usually somewhere in the upper teens or so are going to say, not quite sure yet. Tell me what you got up your sleeve. Let me turn the page literally and figuratively and tell me what you're thinking. So we did. We did turn the page and we talked about what will be included in your base plan at the elementary school, at the middle and high school. And then we wanted to note the cost because this number is what somebody is going to see on a ballot. At the same time, though, we needed to disclose for people how much this was actually going to cost them out of their wallet. So if I'm willing to support this, fine, but what does that mean in terms of my pocketbook? How many dollars do I need to give you to see these projects come to fruition? We wanted to contextualize this a little bit to show what this impact of the base plan would be compared to where you have been in your mill rate. And then we asked the question, would you support a $17 million referendum to fund the projects in the base plan, representing an annual tax increase, of $67 per year or $558 a month for every 100K of property value? And then we disclosed the interest rate as well, where this was estimated on a scale of definitely yes to definitely no. Now, same disaggregations here. Your staff, who are residents, about 3/4 or so said yes to this. For your parent residents, 75% said yes to your base plan as it was described. For your non-parents, non-staff, the data stayed pretty same to the slide that I just had up a couple of minutes ago. Approximately 59% of your non-parents, non-staff said that they would support this. You're probably no and definitely no at 26%. Again, that's fairly common to have about a quarter of people that are going to say no. And your undecided is pretty close as well. So your undecided did go down a little bit, which is what I would expect to see. As people got more into the survey, they saw a clarification and a crystallization of what exactly you were looking to do and how much that would cost them. For reference on the undecided, the blessing and the curse of doing a survey in the Midwest is people are too darn nice. And some of them know full well they're going to tell you no on a ballot, but it feels rude to tell you that. We don't have that problem in New Jersey and New York, and God bless them. And sorry if you're from New Jersey or New York, but when we do surveys there, nobody's undecided. Here in the Midwest, they are. So what we find, though, is about 2/3 of undecided are going to move downward toward no. And some of those people already know it. About 1/3 of undecided will move upward toward yes. So in that case, fortunately here for me, the math is pretty clean. You're looking at about 63, 64, 65% or so of your non-parents, non-staff who are leaning towards yes. Now, a different way to present that, this is the same question, it's the same data, and it's the same principle here, but now what I want to do is I want to mathematically weight the support based on how common people are proportionally in the community. Or in other words, the 25% of people who are parents, what does that support amount to? And the 75% of people who are non-parents, non-staff. When I weight that, you're looking at about 63% or so that are supporting the base plan as described, which is obviously above the 50% plus one that is needed for a referendum. However, as you know, that wasn't the only part of your survey. There were some potential additional projects that you had asked your survey takers to offer input on. And bear in mind the definitions here over on the right-hand side of the screen. So, and I think the next slide is related. No. The definitions on the right-hand slide here, if I said something was high priority, in the background, that was given a score of 3 to start to give some numbers and quantitative data for you here. And high is defined as address this immediately. If something is denoted by a survey respondent as medium, sure, it's important, but it's not right now important. It's addressed in a future project. And if something is low, it's weighted as a 1. And that definition is no, this isn't a priority, and no, I don't want you to address this in a future project. You had 4 of them: tech ed, some additional classrooms and support areas, a gym project, and an auditorium project. Here, same message that I just gave you. So just bear in mind as I move forward, you can't be above a 3 and you can't be below a 1. That's the range for your priority scores. So what did we see? We saw 2 scores that were above medium and that leaned closer to high priority. And you can see that borne out in the images as well here, just based on the color code. Green is high, this kind of neon color is medium, and your yellow is low. So you had 2 projects above 2 at a score of 2.25 was your tech ed expansion, and a score of 2.22 was your additional classrooms and support areas. So again, those are things that are above medium. And then you had 2 that were below medium. So these were the projects that were, kind of below the sure it's important, but not right now kind of thing. These are below it. And again, you can see that kind of borne out here. And just looking at the bar graphs, you can kind of see this play out. Your gym had a score of 1.85, about a quarter or so, a little over a quarter, so that was a high priority. And then your auditorium was down at the bottom at 1.56, and 16% said that was a high priority. Now, to put all this data together, it's one thing to say what something is in terms of my priority, but it's again another thing to say, sure, but I have a lot of high priority things in my house. I'd love to do a lot of things, but I can't afford everything at once. So what is it that I'm willing to tackle right now? So what we said is, based on what the district told us, that we realized paying for all these projects at one time is not realistic. Therefore, your task this evening and moving forward was ascertaining how much money people were willing to support, and then what are you going to get done for that pool of money. Here's again how people made their decision. We denoted the referendum amount, how much various referendum amounts would cost people based on what the land that they own, and then asked the question, assuming the projects funded were acceptable to you, what referendum amount would you support? There's a lot going on this slide, but if you take it one step at a time, the pieces fall together. So first place your eye should go, up at top, because that's non-parents, non-staff. This is 75% of your community, up top right here. And the way that I read this is I say, okay, so if I start down here, actually start up here, 10% of your non-parents, non-staff is in this dark green range. Well, dark green is 37 million. So 10% of your non-parents, non-staff are supportive of $37 million. The alternative way to say that is that ain't gonna fly. That's obviously well below 50%. So your 37 million is essentially off the table. What I do then is I move to the right, or in other words, I ask myself, well, how cheap do I need to go then? How low do I need to go before you cross a majority threshold of support, or you cross the 50% threshold? So then I do my math. So I take 10 and I add 6 for 16. I take another 15 and I'm at 31%. I'm at another 15, I'm at 46%. And I add another 12, I'm at 58%. So I cross majority threshold for your non-parents, non-staff. Let's see, I went down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 levels. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, your non-parents, non-staff are looking somewhere in the $17 million area. Now, obviously, they're a major proportion of your community, but they're not the only people in your community. Your parents and staff are more supportive. For your parents, if I do the same principle here, 27 and 7 is 34, plus 16 is 50%. Well, now I'm at 50% and I only went down 3 levels. So I count 1, 2, 3, I'm at 27 million. If I count in 50% plus 1, so your parents are somewhere in like the $22, $27 million range. So what does that tell me? Well, same principle as before. I asked the same question that was just on the previous slide, but then I get weighted the support at various dollar amounts. So I said, okay, well, what if Viroqua went out for a $22 million referendum? What are survey respondents telling us based on how common they are in the community? A $22 million referendum, we're estimating at about 50.8% support. So that is just a hair over, and it is well within the margin of error at plus or minus 3.5%. Or in other words, this is a very, very, very tight election. If I was Wolf Blitzer, this would be too close to call in front of my fancy CNN map. So then I said, okay, well, what if you do 17 million? Where are respondents telling us for support there? Again, if I weight support proportionally to how common people are in the community, now you're looking well above 50%. Now you're looking at 62.8%. So it looks like kind of your sweet spot here as we're getting closer and closer and more narrow is somewhere at about $17 to $22 million when we get outside of that margin of error. So then putting this all together, so what do you do? In terms of the cumulative project costs, what I did here is I ordered these in terms of how they were prioritized from top to bottom, and then I added in the costs. So for instance, if you were to only do the base plan, that was a cost of 17 million. If that's the only thing on the table, it's a cost of 17 million. If you were to do the tech ed expansion, that was the highest priority of the 4 remaining projects at a 2.25. That's another 3.5, and now you're at 20.5 million. That's kind of in that sweet spot. If we're getting closer and closer, and I said that you're looking at somewhere between 17 and 22 million in terms of what your survey respondents are telling us to support. I think it goes without saying that the cheaper you get, the more support you're going to get. The more expensive it gets, the less support you're going to get. And so fortunately, I think in your case, the data is pretty clean in terms of if we were to do our base plan and the highest priority project, again, you're kind of there. You're between 17 and 22 million at 20.5 million. The part that the board will need to discuss is obviously all of these aren't necessarily take it or leave it completely. And what I don't know the answer to truthfully is, if you were to do part of a tech ed expansion, first, I don't even know if that's possible or what kind of dominoes need to fall, but maybe you do 2 million of a tech ed expansion and you do $1.5 million of some work on your classrooms. That's a possibility. I mean, that's your next highest priority project at a 2.22. But the number one thing that I'll tell you is keep the number in mind first. Projects are important, but keep in mind the dollar amount that people are telling you that they would support. So that kind of sweet spot, again, is 20, 21 million or so based on the data that I'm seeing on the previous slide. The wrong way to think about this would be, and we saw this happen last November as people got survey results and then gas prices started to have a 4 in front of them before the April elections rolled around. People said, well, we're going to do 2 projects because they were highly prioritized, make up a number. They used to cost 10 million, but now they cost 18 million. But these 2 projects are really what people supported. And that's the opposite way that you need to think. Instead, it needs to be, here's the amount of money people are willing to support. How many projects can we get done for that pool of money? And if costs increase, then it may take some rearranging in terms of what you're able to do. But I'd say right now, based on the data that your respondents are telling us, is about this, these first 2 rows here. And I got to admit, I think over the last couple of months, I have gotten a little more bearish. I've gotten a little more conservative, a little less brave in terms of cumulative costs. I can happily come back to that slide, but I do want to round out the remainder of your survey. We said on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend a district to a friend or family member? And your district average is on the side that you want and need it to be on. So at an average of 6.91 on a 0 to 10 scale, you're above neutral. So you're leaning on the end of people recommending you to friends or family members. And this happens to come at the end of our presentations, but there's really not a good reason why we couldn't put this at the beginning. Because one of the reasons why is people don't express dissatisfaction and are willing to open up their wallet. It just doesn't work like that. People aren't going to be mad at you and say, sure, have more of my money. That's not how the game is played. You have to have district satisfaction first before you're able to move forward with a referendum. And I think that's what you're seeing here. You're above neutral, you're approaching 7. That's excellent news for you. And the other thing that I like to do here is just, out of curiosity, I start at the top and I do my math down and I say, well, how low do I need to go before I reach a majority of survey respondents? And it ain't too far. 23% and 11 is 34. And I take 17%, I'm at 51%, I'm over majority, and I've only gotten down to 8. And that's really good news. There are other times, in fact, I was just in a board meeting last week, where I don't cross majority threshold until 4 or 3 sometimes, and that's not fun data to present, and that's not you. So that's good here. That's really good news. So in summary, what did we learn? We learned that a majority of all subgroups support the district exploring a capital referendum. So in other words, there is an appetite to do something based on what we're hearing from your respondents. 2, a majority of all subgroups support the base plan as it's described in the survey. So if the election for the base plan were held today, we would suspect that voters would likely approve this recommended base plan. Finally, 3, based on respondents' priorities and tax tolerance, the district could consider expanding the base plan to include the tech ed investment and keep you in that $17 to $22 million range, kind of squarely in the middle there. So let me pause there, and by all means, let me know what questions you have.
And this is Megan. Before the board asked questions, I just want to preface that you heard a lot tonight. And so the objective of tonight is to take this home, get your questions clarified by Rob first, but then take this home, study it, and then we'll be coming back in July at the July 18th board meeting to start prioritizing and creating solutions for a possible referendum. We have a lot of puzzle pieces here, and there's work to do to put those puzzle pieces together. We found that you have support at 17 million, and it's somewhere between 17 and 22. There's a lot of factors to weigh when making decisions. Your previous referendum experience, the current economy, the social climate, those are all going to factor into voter choice. And so that's why we want you to take some time to think about it. But now is the time to get your questions answered. We'll start diving into solutions when we meet again on the 18th.
Anybody have any questions? All right, so I do. Shockingly, it's just too good to be true. One of the questions that I have is, do you know how many people, that there were multiple people from a home that took a survey? For example, in my home, we filled out one survey and we did it together. So I'm just wondering, with that number of 850 surveys that were returned, how many of them were just one per home? If you know that.
I don't know that, and we don't, because we do try to keep it as confidential as we can on our end too. So what we do is we send the printer a list of whatever, a couple thousand codes, depending on the size of the community, and we say, print these on the survey. And frankly, we don't always want to know who's going where either, because Wisconsin is a small state, and we don't want to know what addresses is going where, and so we hide ourselves from that as well to make it double blind. So the short answer is no, on purpose, because we also want to make sure that we can't figure out what codes are where. And so if somebody did choose to mail it in, we could see the code, but if somebody took it online, that would take a little extra digging. So I guess my short answer is no.
Do you know from the data that you collect the percentage of people who only have, that typically only fill out one survey? So let's say you have 2 people that are voting, but they just fill out one. So does that change the data at all as far as a referendum passing?
We haven't found it to yet. We just did some work after the state education convention in January, because we were kind of curious, what is April going to be different than normal in terms of our accuracy? And so even though we don't track all of those things, our accuracy rate is about 95 or 96%. And the reason we say that is the people that are choosing to take a survey are also the same pool of people that tend to show up and vote. And so that middle of that Venn diagram there is quite wide. And so I guess I apologize that I don't have the answer, nor now that I'm sure could figure it out. But either way, that doesn't provide me any concern in terms of the accuracy of our data based on kind of how we always done things.
Okay, that's something I was curious about. And then one of the questions was, if you have a student attending our district.
Mm-hmm.
So we have some private schools, for example. So we have families that are attending the district, not the public school district, but the private school district. And I don't know how someone would interpret that question. Do you have any way of knowing the answer to that? No.
So bring up this survey. So
I'm curious, people who don't attend our public school district and what their thoughts were on the referendum is really where I'm going.
Well, that would be part of the 54% of the non-parent, non-student of Viroqua schools student. Correct.
Okay.
yeah,
If they interpreted the question that way.
Exactly.
If I go
Maybe.
to Waldorf, did I answer it as?
But what was the exact question? I feel like
Is
it
the
a
question
VAS?
was
Yeah.
more.
I think
School in
it's-
the district.
students attending our district. So to me, we have multiple choices in our district.
Mhm.
And I'm just trying to figure out, just to make sure that we understand who is in that category. Like if you don't have it, you can't assume someone is of a certain age if they filled out that they don't have someone attending our district. And we can't assume that all of the people that filled out the form, we're just a little,
I don't think you're going to get to that.
I don't think we
To
can.
get down.
Well, and in the end, when you look at how the data is shaking out,
Right.
I don't know if you need to split those hairs, right?
Right.
If we were teetering, right, on one of
Right.
those, or, then we could say, oh, maybe there was a misinterpretation. But
Sure.
either way, there was support, how I'm reading it.
Okay.
yeah, and I think if I understand your question, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm understanding your question right, I don't make up a name, St. Mary's is in your community. Are you saying if I have a kid attending a school at St. Mary's and they're in third grade, that I may check yes here because it's geographically in the district?
Yes.
Yeah, so
And you may check no because you interpret it a different way.
Yeah, so we ran out of real estate on your survey, but occasionally we do include what school do you attend?
Real estate.
And so what we found on other surveys where both questions are asked is people do seem to understand where this really is a school that is run by the district, a public school, because we'll find that people will say no. And then if there is a private or parochial school or they're homeschooled, they will say no. So even though that question was not asked in your survey, in other communities, it seems that people catch on pretty quickly that district school means one of your Viroqua schools and not necessarily St. Mary's, St. Paul's, St. whatever, or whatever private school you have in the area.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, Rob, would it be safe to say that because you've hit over that 400 threshold, that understanding exactly which school the parent sends students to wouldn't necessarily matter? I think it's still good for messaging and reaching those students, but it wouldn't change your data.
Yeah, I agree. And my addendum to that is, I think I'd be a little bit more curious about that if you were in a bigger district and you were maybe working at one or two of your elementary schools. In that case, it's kind of interesting to say, well, middle school parents might not be affected by the survey because it's primarily elementary based. So do they feel differently? And in your case, A, you're fairly small. And B, no matter where my kids go to school, they're going to see some work at their school, right? Because you have the elementary and then you have the middle high school site. And so because everybody is going to be seeing their school touched in some way, I don't think that data is quite as useful here.
More could have skewed your non-parent, non-staff
Exactly.
numbers and why ours would be higher, because those students still benefit from the district, even though they
Exactly.
don't go here. So that could skew those
The
numbers.
interpretation.
up a little bit.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyone else? Anyone? No? Thank you.
Oh, of course.
Thank you. It was, and we're hopeful that when this is on our website, if people have more questions, the community has more questions about the data that you collected, that they'll contact the district office for any clarification.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Tom and Beth and Mike, they all have access to my contact info. For better or worse, they know how to find me. And so if you do have questions, or even after July, when you have your next meeting, if you're curious about different ways to disaggregate the data, happy to help.
Thank you.
So,
All right.
yep.
Thank you all very much.
All right.
Thanks
Thank you.
for the information.
Of course. Take care. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you, Rob.
Yep,
Thank you,
take care.
everybody from
Thanks, everyone.
HSR. Thank you.
So with that, is there anyone else that's presenting anything?
Nope.
No, I see people popping up. That's
Yep.
why I asked. All right, with that, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.